Chapter 15. 3 weeks after the beginning of school, Bull arrived home from the squadron at the precise instant that Lillian was setting dinner on the table. In her career as a Marine wife, she had failed in her efforts to train her husband to call when he would be working late or not returning home at all. Bull washed his hands at the kitchen sink, dried them on one of Lillian's aprons, and joined the family for grace. As the pilot said grace, he rubbed his hands together in anticipation of the evening meal and spoke the words of the prayer so rapidly that it would take a most patient deity to find gratitude in the stream of rhetoric offered at the Meacham table. Then Bull, in an expansive mood, shouted, "Chow down, troops," lifting a piece of roast from the platter and biting into it before the meat even touched his plate. "Bull, sugar," Lillian said. "They've invented these weird new instruments. They're called forks." "Yeah, that's right," Bull acknowledged, still fingering the roast. "They've also got these weird old instruments called hands. They work better." "I don't think you should eat like that in front of the children," she said. "Get off my back, will you?" Bill shouted. "I've had a tough day at the office making the world safe for democracy. I'm hungry." "I'm thinking about having a trough built at the end of the table so you can just stick your whole head into a pile of slop." "Mama thinks you eat like a pig, Daddy. She's just trying to help you develop good table manners," Garen said. "I've heard that pigs get sick to their stomachs while eating at the same table with Dad," Marianne said. Okay, Bull sighed, placing his meat on his plate and lifting up a fork with mock delicacy. "Will someone please pass the coquille St. Jack? I'm trying to set a good example for the children. They have great table manners. It's 'cause their mother happens to be a woman of some refinement." "Who married a damn prince among men," Bull grinned. "If one of the hogs doesn't do something right, let me know and I'll deck 'em." "That's not the point. Lillian, I'm in a good mood. No kidding, honey, and we all know how rare that is." "Amen," Ben said quietly. "Hey, I got a great surprise for you sports fans," he said to Ben. "Why am I suddenly finding it difficult to swallow my food?" Ben said, rolling his eyes at Marianne. "What is it, Dad?" "I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Matthews at the club this afternoon. You never thought to call me and tell me you're going to be late. You remember his daughter Ansley from New River, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Ben answered. "Well, she's been going steady for 2 years with this football player at the high school, Jim Don Cooper. Well, Colonel and Mrs. Matthews are trying to put a stop to this little relationship by making Ansley date other people. The long and the short of it is you've got a date with Ansley Matthews this Saturday night." For 10 seconds, the only sound in the dining room was the clink of silver and china. "Tell him I'm not going, Mama," Ben finally said. "You might enjoy it, Ben. Ansley is a sweet girl." "A team of internationally known scientists did a study on Ansley Matthews last year and came to the unanimous conclusion that she is an idiot," Marianne said. "Well, you're going," Bull said, his voice chilling into ultimatum. "Dad," Ben said, looking at his father, "you can beat me or torture me or kill me or do anything you want to me. Just don't make me go on that date Saturday night. Tell Colonel Matthews I have leukemia or terminal hemorrhoids, anything. I just can't go on that date." "Hey, you never dated at all, Jocko. You're almost 18. You've never had a date. I'm beginning to think you're some kind of homo." "Bull, shame on you for saying that to your own son," Lillian flared. "When I was your age," Bull declared, "they couldn't keep me away from the girls with a stick." "He's been sick all his life," Marianne explained to Ben. "I just haven't seen anybody I want to date in this town," Ben said. "Ben dated quite frequently while you were overseas last year," Lillian lied. "Baloney, he's never touched a girl in his life," Bull said. "I think you're right, Dad," Marianne said, sipping from her iced tea. "I think Ben's a homo. I see him looking at you real funny sometimes." "I'm not going out with Ansley," Ben said. "Wait a minute, Hog. I ain't asking you whether you're going out with Ansley or not. I am telling you that you are. The date is set. It is this Saturday evening at 1900 hours, and you will pick her up, and you will be on time, and you will have yourself a blast, or I will personally ruin your whole day." "I think the Matthews just want Ansley to date some nice, wholesome boys for change, Ben," Lillian said. Parents love Ben. Girls don't, but parents do. It's like sending their daughters out on a date with young Jesu, the carpenter, Marianne said. This is just like that time you took me to that church dance up in Arlington, Dad, Ben said, when you bought me that ugly shirt and the ugliest tie I ever made and forced me to go to that sock hop where I didn't know one single human being. You ended up having a ball at that dance. No, I didn't. I walked in through the front door and right straight out the back door. Then I walked 2 miles to a library, read for a couple hours, then walked back to the church, went in the back door and out the front where you were still sitting waiting for me. Then I told you I danced every dance. Of course, in telling you this story, Dad, I do it with the firm belief that you won't belt me for something I did 2 years ago. I don't mind belting you for something you did 2 years ago. Hush up, Bull, Lillian scolded, and try not to act like you're losing your mind. Ben, think of it this way. We've known the Matthews for a long time, and you'll just be doing the family a big favor. Eileen is very worried about this boy Ansley's dating. She ought to be. Jim Donnan has a striking resemblance to the Java man, Marianne said. But that's not really fair. He looks more like a combination of the Java man and Dad. Can you imagine if I said that? Ben asked his parents. I'd be airborne, flying toward Mars right now. The girls in this family can say anything. Marianne, what do I have to do to make you have a more deferential attitude to your parents? Lillian asked, as though pained to the point of numbness, just to have to ask the question. A punch in the mouth would do it, Bull stated. Apologize to your father, young lady. I'm sorry I noticed a resemblance between you and the Java man, Dad. Go straight to your room, young lady, until you can learn the meaning of the word respect, Lillian demanded. Let me just punch her, Bull said, smiling. You underestimate the power of the fist, Lillian. Gentlemen do not punch ladies, sugar. Beasts punch ladies, Lillian stated. Marianne rose from her chair and walked over to her father. Mom's right, Dad. When you hit me, just try to knock out a couple of back molars so it won't mess up my Ipana smile. Bull, rocked with laughter, picked up his roast with his fingers and resumed eating. On Saturday night, Ben eased his father's squadron car up to the main gate of Freedom Bay, the Capehart housing section that sheltered the Marine Station at Ravenel Air Station. The car was a 1951 Plymouth that had passed down to 5 consecutive COs of 367. 2 large circular decals featuring the grotesquely salivating werewolf emblem that symbolized the historical ferocity of the squadron adhered to the sides of the car. The decals glowed with a truculent orange in the dark. Lillian refused to drive the car, declaring that she felt like a moving advertisement for a Lon Chaney movie. Though Ben had pleaded for the station wagon, Bull had insisted that the Plymouth was a conversation piece and would help break the ice on Ben's first date. Corporal on duty at the sentry box braced to attention when he saw the officer's sticker on the front bumper of the car. Lowering the visor and sitting up as high in the seat as he could, Ben nodded at the guard with grandly exaggerated condescension and, mimicking his father, said, "Good evening, son." Ben took a young lieutenant's joy in being saluted. Turning left on Iwo Jima Boulevard, Ben smiled as he always did when he found himself navigating through the Hall of Mirrors, known as military housing. Freedom Bay was a collection of 1,000 brick homes designed by an architect with a passion for duplication. The Meacham family had lived in these houses, all of them at different times in Bull Meacham's career. In the core, there was a uniformity of dress, of ideology, of conduct, and of housing. Twice in his life, Ben had walked into his own house only to find startled strangers eyeing him with both fear and outrage until the mystery was clarified, and he was directed toward his father's house by laughing captains' wives, who claimed they frequently made the same mistake after nightfall. The Capehart housing in Freedom Bay, Ben thought as he curved down Iwo Jima Boulevard, had all the architectural complexity and stylistic flamboyance of an oyster bed. A small, middleless creek formed the one demarcation line of significance in the entire housing project. The creek itself was viscous as phlegm, but its indentation marked the beginning of the brass curtain that separated the officers and their families from the enlisted men and their families. Once he crossed the creek, Ben was in officer's country, his native land. He picked up Ansley Matthews at her house on Command Circle, charming her parents with a pleasant volubility that marked him as a blood member of the tribe. The child of the Marine officer was a prodigy of the first impression. The old courtesies poured out of him at the approach of an adult. So often had Ben been drilled in the proper manner in which to greet Marines and their wives, that his act was no longer an act, but an intrinsic manifestation of his personality. Obsequiousness came easy to him. In fact, he enjoyed the worm's-eye view that servility offered to him. Sitting in the living room, Ben had shone brightly in the companionship of Colonel and Mrs. Matthews, overpowering them with the heavy artillery fire of impeccable manners. He wished he could sit in that living room, decorated heavily with the dreck of Okinawa, and hold forth to the adults all night, but Ansley entered the room with a look on her face that articulated a strong desire to leave the house immediately. As he saw her, two thoughts occurred to Ben. One was that Ansley was far too pretty for him to date or to consider dating, especially on his first excursion. He felt toadish beneath her gaze. The second was that Ansley had wanted to go on this date even less than he did. Her face was flushed with anger and resignation. She did not speak to either of her parents as they left the house, Ben filling in for her hostile silences by exuberantly bidding the Matthews farewell again and again. Standing before the glowing decal of 367 and staring with horror at the dripping fangs of the werewolf mascot, Ansley put her hands on her hips and shrieked, "I'm not going anywhere with this silly horrid thing on the side of the car. Do you want to make me the laughingstock of Calhoun? It's going to be embarrassing enough for me tonight without riding around in this disgusting car." Ben opened the door to the car, his knees so weak that he seemed likely to collapse in the driveway. "This is the only car I could get tonight, Ansley," he said. She shook her head, clicked her teeth, and slid into the car. Rounding the car, Ben was trembling so hard he wondered if he would be able to drive. For 5 minutes, Ansley refused to speak, ignoring every question he asked. Finally, Ben said, "Look, Ansley, I can take you back home if you want. My father and your father set the state up, you know." "My father forced me to go," Ansley said. "I have a steady boyfriend." "I know you have a boyfriend. My father made me go tonight, too. Do you have any particular place you want to go?" "I don't want to go anywhere in this car. I'd rather die." "Do you like being a cheerleader?" Ben said. Changing the subject and grateful that at least she had begun answering his questions. "I'd rather cheer than anything in the world," she said. Then, looking at Ben, asked, "Why don't you play football? You're big enough." "I don't like football." "You're nothing at this school if you don't play football." "You don't play football." "I guess that's supposed to be funny." "I play basketball." "Basketball's nothing, an absolute zero. Jim Don plays basketball, and that's the only reason I even like to cheer at the games. He's captain of the football team, you know. I never saw you at any of the football games. Where'd you normally sit?" "I never went to any games." "Boy, you sure are eating up with school spirit, aren't you, Ben? My daddy's trying to break me and Jim Don up, but I'll never be able to do it. I just hope Jim Don doesn't see us tonight. He beat up one boy that day to me." "Oh, that's great," Ben said, instinctively checking the rearview mirror. "He's insanely jealous, but he's so sweet. I just hope he doesn't see us tonight. He told me he'd be out cruising looking for us." "We won't go anywhere where he can see us." "Oh, we have to. We just have to. We have to make the scene at the shack. My daddy told me to show you where all the gang hangs out. Jim Don has a new Impala. He packed tomatoes last summer and made enough money for a big down payment." "Are those Weejuns you're wearing?" she asked Ben. "What?" Ben asked. "Weejuns, loafers. Everyone at the school wears Weejuns." "No, there's just loafers. They're just loafers. I don't know what kind they are." "That's a Gant shirt, isn't it?" "It might be. Mom bought it at the PX yesterday." "No, it's not Gant," she said impatiently. "The PX doesn't sell them, and there's no loop at the back." "It's Ivy League, though," Ben offered. "It's got buttons on the collar." "That's no big deal." "I've never been to the shack," Ben said. "It's real close to the colored high school. The cutest colored boys in the whole universe right there. They'll just die if they see me with you." Ansley turned the dial until she heard the 8 bellow from WAPE in Jacksonville. Every car in the shack will be tuned to the big APE, she said, singing along with the music. Ben turned into the parking lot of the shack as Ansley slid down in the front seat until her head was not visible to anyone looking in through the driver's side of the car. To his mortification, Ben could see people laughing as they spotted the squadron decals on the side of the car. Choosing the loneliest, most desolate spot he could find, he backed under an overhanging tree in the far corner of the lot. Only then did Ansley's eyes rise to window level and make a peremptory examination of the other cars. "You don't mind if I say hi to a few of my friends, Ben? I see some cheerleaders and their boyfriends parked over there under the light. Order me a cheeseburger without onions, a Coca-Cola, medium, and a large order of fries if Louis comes while I'm gone," she said, throwing him a kiss through the window. She seemed shamelessly gratified to be escaping Ben's presence. Ben rolled down the window and leaned his elbow on the door. He tried to tighten up his face into a mask of insouciance, worldliness, and control. His stomach, though, felt like a ship breaking up on invisible shoals. As Ansley went from car to car, Ben watched her secretly, watching her leaning her breasts into other boys' arms, flirting with a self-indulgent expertise that seemed vilely calculating from Ben's observation post. Her perfume lingered in the car and attacked him in the soft places of his boyhood. He saw her point his car out to a crowd of faces he half recognized, and he heard her high-pitched giggle and the laughter of her companions. He turned the radio up louder. He stole another look and saw how achingly pretty she was, this curving, mindless nymphette who had perfected the insensate cruelties and the small meannesses of adolescence, and sent them marching in snickering battalions toward Ben. Sitting there in the half-darkness, Ben felt cheapened, irreparably damaged by this girl he had known most of his life, but he was not surprised. He knew intuitively that girls like Ansley would elude him always, dance away from him, mocking him, whispering about him in those savagely thoughtless clusters of children living in the pure oxygen of their ordained season. Ansley was part of an aristocracy that brooked no intrusion, at least not now, Ben thought. Ben ordered 2 cheeseburgers without onions, 2 medium Coca-Colas, and 2 large orders of fries when Louis, the tall, expressionless black, came to take his order. He was grateful to Louis just for coming to his car. When the cheeseburgers came, Ben glanced toward Ansley to see if she would return to the car when the order arrived, but she remained where she was in the middle of several football players. Her fingers were traveling secretly to their necks, running along their collars. Then he saw Jim Don Cooper's car pull up beside her. He watched as Ansley entered the car, rushed across the seat, and kissed him long and passionately on the lips. They talked, made out some more, then talked again. He saw Jim Don turn completely around in his seat and stare belligerently at Ben. Oh, great, Ben thought. Now he comes over and beats the shit out of me while I'm sitting in the werewolf squadron car. But Jim Don did not leave his car. Ansley did. With her girlish, provocative gait, she ran over to Ben's side of the car and began eating french fries as she whispered to Ben, "Ben, I want you to be the sweetest boy in the world and let me spend the rest of the night with my steady. We're going to a party one of the cheerleaders is giving out at the beach. You don't mind, do you?" "No, Ansley, I don't mind at all," Ben said. "You're so sweet. I told Jim Don you'd be glad to help us out. Now you won't mention this to your parents, will you, Ben?" "No, I won't say a word." "Okay, bye-bye. And I really had a great time with you tonight. I mean that seriously. You have a wonderful personality. And thanks tons for being so understanding," she said, leaving the car. "Do you want your cheeseburger?" Ben asked. "No, you eat mine too. Jim Don just ordered me one," she said, turning and running back toward the Impala. No one seemed to notice the car after its abandonment by Ansley Matthews. No one seemed to notice the modest solitaire of Ben and his fall from the grandeur of courting cheerleaders. He was skewered by the eyes of strangers no longer. Thank goodness for the big APE radio in Jacksonville that sang to Ben with the same dispassion it sang to every other car in the shack. Ben ate his cheeseburger slowly, thinking about what he could do for the rest of the evening, knowing he could not return home early to face the interrogation of his parents or the teasing of Marianne. He started up the car, his eyes burning. Goodbye, my cheerleader, my first date. Goodbye, my colonel's daughter, my dark last touches, my beauty, my brown-eyed queen. Goodbye, my 1-hour bride, my 60-minute love, my red-lip empress, my Ouija shot inamorata. Why do I love you and girls like you, Ben thought. Why do I love you in secret? Then coldly, as he looked at her again one final time, as he drove his car past her boyfriend's Impala, as he saw her laugh at the decal and point, it was then that he knew her for the first time, and he had an urge to lean out of his window and cavalierly shout au revoir to his enemy. In a fury, he turned from the shack and drove toward town. He didn't see the car pull up behind him and follow him. He heard a car blowing its horn at him as he pulled in front of the National Cemetery on Granville Street. Pulling over to the curb, Ben peered into the interior of a red and black Rambler American that pulled alongside him. Ben turned out his lights and waited for the driver of the Rambler to identify himself. The Rambler pulled in front of him, and a small-boned boy leaped out of the car and walked toward Ben with a ludicrously exaggerated swagger. You're probably saying to yourself, Ben, that a true stud like Sammy Wurzburger always has a date with some gorgeous honey on a Saturday night. But it just so happens that I'm resting my body from a drive-in movie last night where I was attacked again and again by a lovely nymphomaniac. Sammy, I've never been so glad to see anybody in my whole life. I just heard about what Ansley the asshole did to you. I thought you'd already left when I saw you pull out. I've known her for a long time. She used to be pretty nice. Why don't you ride shotgun up there in the Jewish submarine and I'll show you the town. Maybe then we can catch the late movie at the Breeze Theater. Sounds great to me. Let's make like horseshit and hit the trail. Thanks for following me, Sammy. The night is young, Sammy said to Ben, and there are thousands of women waiting to get their hands on the both of us.